I stand in front of you today as a bad father. This is an old picture of my sons, and as you can see, I let my sons play video games as they grew up. But worse than that, I let them play violent video games from fairly young age, despite the association of violent video games with many horrific events such as the Columbine shootings that happened. And perhaps maybe even worse because of my own research. In the early 1990s, I directed one of the earliest dissertations on the effects of playing violent video games on aggressive behavior. And like literally hundreds of studies since then, we demonstrated that playing violent video games increases aggressive behavior. So I stand here as a bad dad. Now, in my defense, we didn't allow them to play just any video game. So for example, when Rockstar Games came out with the game Bully, we had the same concerns that many parents had, that this might glorify bullying behavior. And so we said, no, you're not going to play this game. One of the nice things, though, about when you study video games, you can tell your sons they can't play the game, but you go ahead and study it yourself. So we studied the game right when it came out to see if it had the effects that people said it would have. I mean, the game was banned in several countries because people thought it would increase bullying behavior. So we brought students into the lab, and we had them fill out a number of scales, and then they came in a week later and played the game for an hour, and we saw what effects it had. We found no increases in aggression. We found no increase in people's propensity to engage in bullying behavior when they played the game. But at the same time, we were also playing the game ourselves, and what we found is the game really wasn't what it would have been cracked up to be. You're dropped off at a prep school, like they had said, but as the character, you're not engaging in bullying behavior. Instead, you're navigating various cliques at that school to try to avoid being bullied. And yes, you get in a lot of fights and there's a lot of aggression in the game, but there are also these little side trips you have to do for points in the game, and many of those involve defending the victims of bullying. And so we brought people in, like we said, and we had them play the game. And a week earlier, we had measured what is your attitude towards defending the victims of bullying. And this is what we had for the people who actually played the game and for those people who didn't play the game. Then they came in a week later and they played for an hour. And what we found was pretty startling. For the people who didn't play, as you would expect, a week later their attitudes towards defending the victims of bullying hadn't changed. But for people who played the game, their attitudes towards defending victims of bullying changed remarkably. In other words, as we've found in a number of studies since then, people internalize their choices, and they internalize the motivations for the play. In this case, we think for a good outcome, and other times it can be a bad outcome. Another thing that's changed in games since the early 1990s when we started studying them was how people play games. In the early 1990s, most games were solo games. Now, most games allow you to play multiplayer formats. And people seem to like to play the multiplayer format. In a recent survey we did looking at how you like to play games, we found that people still enjoy playing games solo. They also enjoy playing games with other people watching them while they play. But what they really like to do is to play in groups. And in particular, what we find is that people seem to like to play what we call cooperative competition, where you play together as a group against either the machine or another set of human beings. So you have a common goal that you're cooperating to try to achieve. Now, what happens when people play cooperative games like this? Well, what we find is that you get an increase in helping behavior. And you can see, yes, this is a posed picture, so you can see why I'm a professor and not a photographer. But these are my sons helping each other, and we find that a lot when people play cooperatively. But we had people tell us that really that's all that Columbine was about, that these two young men played violent games together and they learned how to cooperate and become horrific killers. But we thought it was more complex than that. And so we started looking at what are the effects of cooperative gameplay. And what we found in a number of studies is we get an increase in helping behavior during the game. But more importantly, after the game, we find that people will continue to cooperate with each other and engage in a number of different pro-social behaviors. Working together with people makes us more pro-social and more cooperative. Now, you may say this is done in a lab and it's not really, the real world. It's not going to tell us what's going on there. So we decided to test that and take advantage of where we're at, the Ohio State University. And it's my understanding that there's a number of students here today. So if I were to say OH. Okay, yes. We are proud of our university. And if I ask those same students about that university up north where they dress in blue, is that the University of Michigan? What do you think of them? So we had students come into the lab to play a game, cooperatively or competitively. Unbeknownst to them, the person they were playing against was a Confederate, and that Confederate was either wearing an OSU t-shirt, so the in-group, or they were wearing a Michigan t-shirt. And our poor Confederates, when they were walking across campus, they got such a hassle when they were wearing that Michigan shirt. They even got hassled by the students in the study before they started playing the game. It was a pretty good manipulation. And then they played the game for 15 minutes. And then we measured trust and cooperative behavior afterwards. And this is what we found. That as we demonstrated in a number of studies, when you cooperate with another person for just 15 minutes, you're more trusting and you're more pro-social with that person than if you play competitively. And you might notice that there's no lines here for OSU versus Michigan because it didn't matter. You were equally cooperative, you were equally trusting, whether the person was wearing a Michigan or an OSU t-shirt. Were they best friends forever? I don't know, but we think this is a pretty remarkable finding. What's the take-home message from all of this? Well, first of all, I think it says that human behavior is more complex than simple cause and effect relationships. Violent video games don't necessarily make us aggressive people. There's a lot of research that does demonstrate there is a link there. But there can also be positive effects of playing games, depending on the orientation that you take to the game. Personally, the more important outcome of this research is perhaps I don't need to feel quite as guilty about the father that I was. That maybe I wasn't such a bad dad. And you know those two young boys? They're growing into amazing young men, and I am so proud of them, and I love them so much. The adage used to be, it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. We would change that adage a little bit and say, it's not the content of the game that matters. What matters is how you choose to play that game. Thank you.